My girlfriend, 22 female, confessed to me, 24 male, that she had been speaking to someone else over Instagram and that she had felt attracted to him, but that she was feeling guilty and she regretted it. I duck and lost my crap. Why? You must be wondering. After all, nothing happened. Well, I have a miraculous ability to spot people's lies, and this crap was the biggest bullcrap ever heard. She was cold since the beginning of the relationship, so feeling guilty for just talking didn't seem like her. Being too attached to her, I tried to let it go and focus on work, but something was off and I could still feel it. The paranoia was eating me from the inside out. During the next weeks, we were mutually distant, and she had been surprisingly social, going out with different friends, or so she said, even though she barely has any. This gave me enough to work out that she had told me a half-truth and that she was still doing shady stuff. I still don't understand the reason to half confess something to just keep on doing it. The relationship was pretty much dead in every aspect, and I had suggested the idea of breaking it up because I saw no point anymore, but she insisted on trying and trying, because I had located her a good job and she was making big progress thanks to my friends. When I realized this was her reason to go on, something clicked inside me. I had been there for her through unimaginable familiar crap, professional frustrations, and personal betrayals from her friends. I gave her my all the time. I lived to make her happy. But in reality, she had been living on my expense and leaving me in the dark. Being the ducking idiot that I was, I started plotting my Arctic cold revenge in silence. I contacted a random girl, Jay, that gave me her number some months before these events, but that I never got to call due to me being faithful. I explained why I never called, and she was down for it. The first date we only flirted, but a kiss from her surprised me at the end. It made me feel awkward and guilty. The very next day, I waited for my girlfriend to get in the shower and opened her messages to snoop around. I discovered what I had suspected for various weeks. She had kept the show going, and to incredible levels. Going out multiple times a week, sending pictures, sexting very often, and even during time windows in which I was with her. Copying and pasting sex-related messages that she sent to me when we met. Even posing for him with clothes my parents gifted her for Christmas. My guilt flew out the window. Somehow I managed to control myself from freaking out and exposing her. This mustered all the courage and blind rage I needed, so that night I called Jay again and went through with it in the most spectacular, anger-driven way I could imagine. For the next 2 months or so, I kept this up. Had sex with Jay as much as hard, and as often as I could while still being a normal boyfriend. Some days, I spent the entire evening ducking Jay just to see my girlfriend at night and duck her some more while I focused on the hate in my head. After that, I usually left out little hints of mistrust towards her, just to make her feel anxious and guilty. In the end, I broke things off with my girlfriend, uncovering her lies, but kept my things to myself so I could keep my moral superiority over hers. She denied it all even after I showed proof. She cried for days about getting back together. This part actually made me feel like it was all for nothing, and never really gave me closure. Jay got comfortable around me, but I was far gone into the narrative of this plan. I couldn't even consider going out with anyone at this point, so I had to stop things with her too. In a much less dramatic way, because she was partly aware of what was going on with me and was mostly in this for the sex. Some months passed, and the girl that my ex most hated, because she was very popular among common male friends, happened to come work with me. To my surprise, we hooked up and kind of got close to each other, but not serious. My ex was still bitter over the breakup when she found out and texted me to confirm it. I avoided answering and instead drove to her house to tell her in person and watch her crumble. Edit. All this crap did nothing but mess with my head. Her cheating gave me anxiety of other people betraying me, but what I did proved that I too was a piece of crap like no other. Since the realization of this, my treatment for women and relationships has changed greatly. I would never pull some crap like this again. But at the same time, it had to happen for me to change and see the consequences of letting oneself go with rage and hate. It only leads to pain, not healing. Edit 2. For those feeling bad for Jay, I only chose her as my accomplice, because she was in a relationship when she gave me her number, hence was trying to cheat. Basically, I thought I was making justice in more than one name. Nevertheless, I feel bad for her. She didn't deserve being caught in my crap and treated like that. She was the only one smart enough to ghost forever. Cheating wife is remorseful after I found out the infidelity while she was in her hometown. When she returned, I threw her on a curb and said she'd get the divorce papers soon. I met my wife in an online book club about 10 years ago. At that time, I did not know anything about her beside the books she was reading. Found out that she was going through chemo radiation for stage 4 metastatic cancer, so I messaged a couple of guys in the group asking if they are willing to send me small gifts so I can organize a care package for her. She received the package in the mail and was so happy, thankful, and appreciative. We started to message each other privately, became friends, and eventually it blossomed into a long-distance relationship. I continued to send her letters and small gifts which she would open after every chemo appointment until she finally went into remission. We lived 1,000 miles apart. I flew to visit her, she flew to visit me. After all the back and forth, she eventually moved to my state. We bought a house together in 2015, got engaged the same year, and got married in 2016. On the surface, it was a great marriage. We had one argument in the entire 6 years of marriage. I was making good money, which gave her the opportunity to land her dream job, which she still holds today. We had a great income and no kids. Remove the stressor of money and kids out of marriage, and there is little left to argue about. If we had disagreements, we resolved them within hours, or so we thought. I will expand on this later. In 2020, we sold our house and moved 1,000 miles to live closer to her family. She had a hysterectomy in May 2021 for chronic bleeding, required 2 units of blood prior to surgery because her hemoglobin was critically low. I was fully supportive of her. She took 12 weeks off work to recover. I took 6 weeks off work to care for her. The surgeon cleared her to return to work after 6 weeks, but I was supportive of and encouraged her to take the full 12 weeks off to recover. After I returned to work and a week before she was scheduled to work, she flew out of state to see her female friend and coworker. During that stay, she had sex with another man with whom she was having an emotional affair with for months. I don't know if I was the first person she had sexual experience with post-surgery or if it was him. He knew that she was married. How I discovered the cheating was completely by accident. Last weekend, she was out of town for a conference. A couple of things, which in retrospect had no direct relation to the affair, occurred that gave me a bad feeling in the gut, and I went through her computer for the first time in our marriage. I saw the explicit texts and photos. I picked her up at the airport, drove her to our house, parked in the driveway, turned to her and said, "Look at me. I know everything. I know that you've been cheating on me. I have seen the photos and text messages. Here is what is going to happen. You are going to go inside and grab your essentials. You can go stay with your parents or friends. The next time you will hear from me will be through my divorce lawyer." She did not deny anything. She was walking through the house to pick up her belongings. I was walking behind her because it felt like a stranger was walking in my house and going through our belongings. I never raised my voice or my hand at her, just like during our 6 years of marriage, during the entire process. After she left, I turned on the alarm system and stacked chairs again the front door. I was afraid that she'd come back if I fell asleep. It felt like an intruder was breaking into my house. I slept for a total of 50 minutes during that last 24 hours. After she left, my intention was to call a divorce lawyer the next day. I could not get a day off from my work. I texted her to come to the house. The title is in both of our names, so I was not legally allowed to kick her out. Before I left for work, I wanted to make sure that she was not going to do anything crazy in the house alone. We agreed to talk after I returned from work. We talked for 2 days in a row. There was a lot of crying from both of us. What looked like a great marriage on a surface was marred by the lack of communication for 6 years from both of us. We both avoided conflict and instead chose to bottle in our feelings. We learned more about each other in 2 days than we did over the course of the entire marriage. While she was away on her conference trip, I drove 1.5 hours to help her 90-year-old grandfather get out of bed, provide incontinence care, toilet him, help with breakfast, and give medication. This was the second time in 2 weeks. She texted me how much she loved me and how she appreciated what I was doing for her grandfather. She claims that she was going to break up with me after returning from the conference. Break up under the guise of falling out of love with me and not mention the infidelity to avoid hurting me. I honestly don't believe her and have a strong feeling that she'd have continued to string me along. Every single issue could have been resolved if each one of us put in just a little bit more effort. While we shared some common interests, we could not relate to the interests which were most important to each one of us. On the first day, I blamed her entirely. On the following day, I started to blame myself for not being an attentive husband. After working from home all day, all she wanted to do was talk to me after I came home from work. I just wanted peace and silence after slaving away for 12 hours. She wanted to talk about social and personal issues which were important to her, but I did not even offer a listening ear because I could not relate to her experience. This is just a couple of examples. There are dozens of others. And I don't claim to have been a perfect husband. I have my faults. But I genuinely tried to make her happy, at least as much and in ways I could. I found her at the lowest point in her life: offensive previous marriage, cancer, anxiety, depression, seizures, and future alcohol offense. Excluding the affair, we will be getting divorced at the highest point in her life. She is in cancer remission, abstinent from alcohol for 1.5 years, no seizures for 3+ years. Her anxiety, depression are better controlled, has a great group of friends and family who live close by. And I'm at my lowest point now. I uprooted my life for her after the move and have no local support. I haven't told my parents because they will be devastated. I'm afraid that the news will send both of them to the hospital because they loved her so much. We are currently living as roommates of friends in our house. We have agreed to make the divorce and transition as smooth as possible for both of us, even if it takes months. She offered for me to keep the house, take the newer car, keep both of our cats, etc. I can see how remorseful she is. Yesterday, we attended a virtual Al-Anon for family meeting, therapy for family members of alcoholics. What resonated with me was that family members should not blame themselves for the behavior of alcoholics. I feel like I'm blaming myself for my wife's infidelity when I'm the actual victim here. I'm here for support from others who've gone through similar experiences. I'll need to learn to trust my future partner when the person whom I had complete trust in blindsided me like this. My first session with Infidelity Survivors Anonymous is this Saturday. Edit: I will add this detail for some context and not to excuse or give a legitimate reason for her to cheat. She was my first serious relationship. I had a couple of flings before her, but that did not progress to anything more serious because of a problem I had, ED. And while we had a spicy sex life when we were in LDR, once we started living together, the problem returned. At one point early in the relationship, we went many months without having sex. She begged me to see a doctor, but I kept putting it off. Entirely my fault. I was younger, less mature, and frankly embarrassed. Eventually, at age 29, I'm 33 now, I got tested and found out I had very low testosterone level. And I don't know how many years I've lived this way. Probably a decade, because I always felt like I had less energy than my peers. I received T replacement at that time and felt like a new man. We started having sex again, but admittedly it was never as good as it was in LDR, and never lived up to the fantasy we had prior to living together. There were still times when I couldn't stay hard, though they were much less frequent than before. She did say yesterday that while the sex was less frequent, she did enjoy it when we did have it. What I lacked in one area, I made up for it in another area, giving her oral, which she loved, and vice versa. Recently, I started to feel like my T levels were low again. Now, more mature, I went to get tested and have a follow-up visit next week for results. Again, this is not to minimize her infidelity, but if I talk about her flaws, it's only fair that I mention my own to paint the complete picture.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike. What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.